Well, now, we call this the act of mating. But there are several other very important differences between human beings and animals that you should know about.
Evolutionary psychology has a bad habit of exaggerating the differences between men and women. And this is particularly true of the men are from Mars, women are from Venus genre of pop evolutionary psychology. The truth is that the differences tend to be small with overlapping distributions, as we've talked about. And so it is the case with mate preferences, what heterosexual couples tend to look for in the opposite sex. If you ask them, if you ask, for instance, men, what are the top 5 qualities you look for in a woman? This is what men's top 5 looks like. First thing, most important thing they're looking for in a woman, intelligence. Second, good looks. Third, humor. Fourth, honesty. And then fifth, good looks again. If you ask women the same question, they say first humor, then intelligence, then honesty, kindness, and values, good values. And as you can see, there's a lot of overlap between these lists, with 3 of the 5 being the same between the two groups. And if you look at number 6 for women, it tends to be good looks as well. So there's a lot of overlap. When evolutionary psychologists talk about sex differences in mate preferences, they're not talking about the most important characteristics that men and women report, because on the most important characteristics, they tend to be aligned. What they tend to talk about are the most gendered characteristics, the ones where you see a maximal difference. And the 3 big ones are the ones we're going to talk about today, which are differences in age, with men preferring younger partners and women preferring older partners, differences in status, with women preferring richer, more powerful, more high status men. And then finally, differences in physical attractiveness, with men placing a higher premium on physical attractiveness in their partners than women place in theirs. Let's start with age preferences. So the most striking illustration of this is the following chart. This is the most striking version that I've seen. If you ask women of different ages, what is the age of men who look best to her? What you see is a nice diagonal line which corresponds mostly to the woman's age. So if you look here, the woman's age is on the, y-axis here, going up and down, and the men's age that looks most attractive is on the diagonal. So a 20-year-old woman thinks a 23-year-old man is the most attractive. Same with the 21-year-old, 22-year-old thinks it's a 24-year-old woman, all the way up to a 48, 49, 50-year-old woman who thinks like a 40-year-old, 45, and 46-year-old is the most attractive. The diagonal line, the dotted line, would be a perfect indication that the man that she finds most attractive corresponds exactly to her age. And what you see is it's reasonably close. Younger women think that slightly older men tend to be the best looking, and by the time you cross over into your late 30s and 40s, you think slightly younger men are the most attractive. Here's the chart for men. So as you can see, regardless of how old the man gets, the most attractive woman to him is someone between a 20 and 21-year-old, really. The 45-year-olds will be willing to go up to 24. Extreme differences here. And you guys know why that is. Women of that age, early 20s, tend to be at their most fertile. They tend to be the ones who are most likely to conceive children, which becomes more difficult as women age, to the point where if you're in your late 40s or 50s, it becomes extremely hard to conceive. As a result, those men who were most attracted to the young women were more likely to successfully reproduce, leaving children with them, whereas those men who were the ones who were most attracted to women in their 40s and 50s, or who had no age preference whatsoever, did not reproduce as well, and as a result, they are not our ancestors. We are the descendants of those who had the younger age preference. But this isn't all that matters to men when they choose their partners. And you can tell that by looking at this particular graph. If it was the case that all men cared about was the fecundity of their partners. They would constantly be looking for women in that age bracket, that, I guess, 15 to 35-year-old age bracket. But that's not exactly the case. As you can see here, and let's just look at the men graph here. What this shows on the x-axis is how old the men are, and what you see on the y-axis is their tolerated age difference from their partner. This is for heterosexual men. And so what you can see is an 18-year-old is willing to go a couple years younger and up to 5 years older. So somewhere between 16 and 23. As men get older, they tolerate a larger difference going younger. But it's not just this critical window between, say, 15 and 35 that they are only considering. You can see that men who get up into their 50s and 60s will consider women who are 10 or 12 years younger than them. So in their 40s or 50s, they're not only considering women who are 22 or 24. In fact, they're not considering those women at all. If you look at women, on the other hand, you see a slightly different pattern, though it's almost the basic flip of what you see for men. So younger women won't consider men who are much younger than them at all. So an 18-year-old maybe will date a 17-year-old. She's not going to date a 16-year-old guy. She may date somebody who's 25. As a woman gets older, the tolerance becomes basically equal on both sides. She's willing to consider somebody 5 years younger or 5 years older, 7 years younger or 7 years older, and it corresponds to her age. So a 45-year-old woman will consider somebody from 38 to 52. Now, in economics, they make a distinction between what's called expressed preferences and revealed preferences. Expressed preferences are what people report liking. So people may say, oh yeah, I like any brand of macaroni and cheese. But revealed preferences are what they actually do. If you go to the supermarket, you see that only one brand of macaroni and cheese actually sells. And so while what we've previously seen are the expressed preferences in terms of age of your partner, what are the revealed preferences? Now for this, we can look at dating websites. Now these data are a little older. I think these are from OkCupid. I would like to see updated data for Tinder or Bumble. I looked for it. It's not out yet, and that actually surprises me. It's probably because it's proprietary and those companies don't want to share it. But what you see here is on OkCupid, a woman's age preference that she lists in her profile. So as you can see, it's sort of similar to what we saw in the previous chart. Younger women won't consider men that much younger than them, though they will consider men 6 or 7 years older. And that 6 or 7 years older stays consistent as she gets older, and she's willing to consider men slightly younger than her the older she gets. So a 48-year-old woman will be willing to consider somebody who's, 41. What about for men? Well, this is what you see. As they get older, as we saw in the previous chart, they're willing to consider younger and younger women. A 48-year-old man is willing to consider somebody down to the age of 30, but not younger. That's who they list in their preferences. That is, to some degree, more of a revealed preference than what we saw before, but it's still an expressed preference. It's still what people are saying that they're interested in. What if we look at whom they actually send messages to when they match with people? This is what you see. This is a heat map for what you see for women. If the purple line is the exact center of her allowable age range, you can see that the greenish tint, is the age range to which that woman is sending messages most frequently, with the yellow less frequently and the red basically not at all. And so what you can see is actually the green line ends up pretty close to the purple line. Her revealed preferences are very similar to her expressed preferences. What about for men? Here's what you see for his heat map. So the purple line again is the center of their expressed age preferences. The revealed preferences are those people that they send messages to. So it skews slightly younger. The young men prefer women the same age and will send messages to the same age. As men get older, They are expressing a slightly younger age preference, and they're sending their matches just a little bit younger than even that. So you can see there's a lot of yellow below where they list their youngest acceptable match. That's actually true for both men and women. But the green tends to skew underneath the average, the median point of their oldest allowable and youngest allowable match. So the sum of all that is that this is what you tend to see on at least OkCupid for the desirability of a man and woman depending on their age. Women hit their peak desirability, not surprisingly, 20, 21, 22. Men hit their peak desirability 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. And then it diminishes for both groups. Now, there's reasons to expect that this might change. And there's reasons to expect it could change in either direction. So with the advent of Tinder and Bumble, which are much more looks-based than something like OkCupid was, which I think involved more of a profile that you'd write, one that people would actually read, this might get exaggerated because people are basing their attraction more on looks, which tend to skew more towards a younger age. There's also a possibility that the difference between men and women will shrink. And the reason for that is because that tends to be the pattern we see as countries get more equal. And so I want to introduce this particular paper. This is a brand new paper, just came out this year. It's a replication of the seminal cross-cultural work that's done on mate preferences. And there you see David Buss, whom we read, is one of the authors. But look how many authors there actually are on this paper. This is an enormous piece of work. 45 different countries. If you ask people around those 45 different countries, how old is this is for heterosexual people again, how old is your partner? You see a pretty close replication of what we've seen before, which is that women's partners are slightly older than them, about 3 years, and men's partners are slightly younger than them and get younger, progressively younger than they are, the older the men get. But you also see what I mentioned before, which is that as countries become more gender equal, so you can see the gender equality composite as it gets higher, meaning those countries have more gender equality. The age difference, this is actual age differences, not stated in mate preferences, this is actual age differences between the partner and the self, tend to shrink between men and women. So in more egalitarian countries, the age difference between male and female partners is smaller than it is in less egalitarian countries. So as countries move towards greater levels of gender equality, this age gap may shrink considerably. Now, that's not necessarily the case for the other two sex differences that we were talking about in mate preferences. And this is what we would call the big two. And that's physical attractiveness and status. So if you look at this chart here, what this chart shows is 6 critical bases on which people have mate preferences for. The health of their partner, the kindness of their partner, intelligence, physical attractiveness, good financial prospects, and age. And what you see is how much of a sex difference there is. The more the dots are on the left side of the line, the more this is something which is more desired of men. Higher age, higher financial prospects. The more it's on the right side of the line, the more it's desired in women. Now, the table that you see on your right is the results of a predictive model looking at how those sex differences change depending on the level of gender equality. As we talked about, the age difference does seem to interact with gender equality. As gender equality increases, the age difference shrinks. But if you look at good financial prospects and physical attractiveness, there you don't see a significant difference based on gender equality. That suggests that these things tend not to be as culturally variable as age difference. They tend to be more culturally invariant, which is more suggestive of an evolutionary basis. Even as women get more equality with men, they still tend to look for men with higher financial prospects. Even as women get more equality with men, they still tend to value physical attractiveness less than men do. Let's look deeper into this stuff. So I want to start with this particular paper, which it's about 8 years old, but it did a pretty large analysis. Over 20,000 participants between the ages of 18 and 65, looking at sex differences and age differences in mate preferences. One of the things they found is that women are more likely than men to be able to imagine marrying somebody who is not good looking. It's minorities in both cases, but it's about half women and only a third of men could imagine marrying somebody who's actually not good looking. But what's more important is how culturally invariant this is. So what you're seeing here are the mean rankings of good looks amongst a number of different characteristics of mate preference. The lower it's ranked, that is ranked closer to number one, means it's more important. There you see what women rated, and there you see what men rated. And though there is cultural variability, it goes up and down between all these different countries, from Argentina to Venezuela. There is no country in which women cared more about good looks than men did. And that's illustrative, something that's consistently found over and over again. It's illustrative of a fundamental difference between men and women on the importance of this dimension. Now, what is it that determines physical attractiveness in women across these cultures? Obviously, there's a lot of variation. There are a lot of styles that come in and out that exist differently in one place rather than another, but there are certain cues which seem to exist across cultures and across times. And we can split these into face and body. I don't want to spend too much on this because this stuff is actually probably stuff you've all heard before, and evolutionary psychologists actually spend an embarrassing amount of time talking about this stuff. But let's get over it pretty quickly. So in terms of, for both men and women, what makes an attractive face? It's a combination of symmetry and gender typicality. When it comes to women, gender typicality means neoteny. Now, neoteny basically translates to baby-likeness. It's exaggerated cues of youthfulness because those suggest fertility. What would those be? Big eyes, full lips, small chin, small nose. So essentially, we're looking at Ariana Grande, who is an attractive young woman, but she also looks like she's 12 years old, which is strange. In terms of the body, we're also looking at cues of fecundity, which means old enough to be able to bear children, but not so old that the ease of bearing children, not the ease of bearing children, the likelihood of bearing children is diminished. And what is a good indicator of that? It turns out that the key is waist to hip ratio. So this was a Turkish study that was done. It presented these different types of women to men and asked men to rate the most attractive. Now they varied on two dimensions. Along the x-axis, they varied on waist to hip ratio. That is the hourglass figure. On the y-axis, it varied by weight, by body mass index. What they found was that the top one is body mass index. That had no impact, zero impact on attractiveness. It correlated not at all. On the other hand, waist to hip ratio was a particularly strong determinant of which body type was found more attractive, with the most attractive being a 0.7 waist to hip ratio. Now, that's what we tend to see, again, across time. Now, this is from the same culture. You have Jessica Alba from the aughts, attractive. You had Kate Moss, which was what was attractive in the 90s. It was a weird time. And then you have Marilyn Monroe, attractive in the 50s and 60s. All of these women have different body types when it comes to body mass index. All of them share a 0.7 waist-hip ratio. Those are dated references, I know, but we would assume that the same thing is true in 2020. Who are the sex symbols of the modern era? Leave it down in the comments below. Don't leave it down in the comments below. But Ariana Grande, I looked this up. It's ridiculous how easily this information is found. She has a waist-hip ratio of about 0.75. Kendall Jenner, 0.71. And Nicki Minaj is something ridiculous, like 0.65, maybe. But it's also what you see if you go way further back. This is the Venus de Milo, 0.7 waist-hip ratio. In fact, they did an analysis of figurines from across multiple cultures going back a long way. And what you tended to see again is that the ideal female body type clusters at 0.7 waist-hip ratio. In fact, they went further. They gave men who had been blind from birth, congenitally blind men, figurines that had a waist-hip ratio of either 0.7 or 0.84. They asked them which one was more attractive. Men who'd never been exposed visually to any type of culture. They'd never seen a magazine or a TV, actually seen it. But what they found was that they found the 0.7 waist-hip ratio more attractive than the 0.84. Now, why is there this seemingly encoded, culturally invariant, evolved preference for a 0.7? And again, evolutionary psychologists spend way too much time worrying about this. But what we found is that it's not actually a great between-person predictor of fecundity, which is to say that if you look at two women, and one has a lower waist-hip ratio that is more of an hourglass figure, it's not a good indication that she's more fecund than the other one. It's not a better indication that she will produce a better baby at all. What it is a good predictor of is the point during a woman's lifespan when she herself is at her most fecund, which is to say that women's waist-hip ratios during their lifespan will be the lowest after puberty, but before they have their first child. Men have evolved a signal to be most attracted to women at that point in their life because that's when they are most able to conceive for a long time still. As a result, the men who were cued into that particular body type rather than a different body type were again more likely to leave multiple offspring and thus be better represented in the next generation and thus be more likely to be our ancestors. All right, guys, this lecture got a little longer than I expected, so I'm going to split it here. Come back for lecture 4.2.